I'm going to call to order the work session for the Board of Commissioners for October the 4th, 2010. I want to welcome everybody that's here in the audience, and as well as everybody that is at home being able to watch it at their leisure. Commissioner Privet has called and said that he is running a little bit late. Commissioner Caruth called, but we are able to get started. So I would like to call everyone's attention to the agenda that we have before us. And if maybe a little bit easier to look at it, the new business that we have, we will be conducting today. Absent the new business that we're conducting today, is it all right if may I have a motion to approve the agenda as is, with the consent agenda being transferred to the October 18th consent agenda?
So moved.
Right.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. The first business that we have today is a matter that we've been discussing, that there was a meeting on September the 21st regards the EDC and the public investor agreement and budget amendment of $50,000. I would, at this point in time, I'd refer everybody to page 170 of our agenda, and let's see here. This is Mr. Cox is here as well as Mr. McDaniels. I don't know if they don't need to make a presentation that I'm aware of, but for the commissioners' understanding and getting everybody up to speed is that on September the 21st, we were asked, Commissioner Poole, myself, and Mr. Day were asked to meet with the Economic Development EDC board, or EDC members, which was Mr. Cox, Mrs. Seyfried, and Mr. Lampy, concerning continued funding from November the 1st, 2010 until July the 30th, 2011. We worked through a contract, and we employed the requests of this board, which is in that contract, and I believe it is attached. Yes, it is attached, but it incorporates the request of this board, and there was some good dialogue between the three members from the EDC as well as the county representatives. If nobody has any objections, we can place this under new business for discussion and approval. As far as I recall, the EDC board is going to be meeting prior to our meeting on October the 18th to take it up for approval. We were told that there's probably not going to be any problems with approval, so that it can be signed and executed on the 18th. Do we have a motion? Do we have any discussion at this point in time? We have a motion to place this under new business on October the 18th. We have a motion. Do we have a second? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. The next matter that we have is the Department of Aging Title V additional grant funds to establish 13 new temporary positions and related budget amendment on page 184. Mr. Murphy.
Good afternoon. I am here to request approval of the contract for the fiscal year 2011 Title V program, which includes an increase of $132,182 from last fiscal year, and this additional money will be used to fund 13 new temporary positions in this program that allows us to train older adults 55 and older and try to recertify them for unsubsidized employment in the community. So my request is for approval of the contract, the attached budget amendment, and the approval to create these 13 new temporary part-time positions. My understanding is the funding is in the state recurring budget, so should be available for the next fiscal year also, with no guarantees to that, obviously. And we will, we are using, there's a 10% required match, and we're matching that with in-kind funds that are already budgeted. We're using funds that are budgeted for one of our employees salary and benefits to match this grant and the requirements through an in-kind match. So there's no additional county funds required to match this project.
Any questions for Mr. Murphy?
Does that program include retraining retiring commissioners?
It could. There is an income eligibility
job.
requirement, so come talk to us.
Any other questions for Mr. Murphy? Commissioner Kruth?
One, like the title contract, I know that there were several columns that had this. Is this the same kind of employment program?
Yeah, it's all over the state. This project is coordinated through the Division of Aging Adult Services and then through the Area Agency on Aging, which are located in COGS. So there's 17 regional offices across the state. Central Line is where our funding, the funding comes through them and they monitor this program for us.
Just told to turn my mic on. So. Of course, I was eating, so I didn't want to turn it on when I was smacking. So
How many seniors or adults are you planning on trying to service and help?
We have 22 positions currently funded. This will give us 35. We have 5 unfunded positions that we use for lapse salary. Where we have lapse terms in employment where we are interviewing, hiring, or whatever, we use any money that we have not, or any hours we have not been able to draw down. We put them in those other 5 positions. It allows us to draw down all the resources that are available, all the revenue. So we could have as many as 35 to 40 based on the capacity that we have and how we're drawing down the funds.
How many seniors are you planning on being able to serve with these additional positions?
There'll be 13 it could be 20 or 25, it depends. There's a maximum of 24 months that they can serve in this program.
Okay.
We're required to place, it's either 20 or 25% of our total annually. We've been running this program for 3 years. We've always surpassed our goal, our required target on that. So as we place people, it's kind of a revolving door. Hopefully, if it works well, we don't have people in these slots long. We roll them over and put new people in them. So it's kind of a moving target, but these 13 positions could touch 20 people or 25 people this year.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion to place this under consent agenda.
Salute.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
very
Murphy.
much.
Next matter we have is page 198. And this is a reservation of capacity for Olive Woods subdivision. Mrs. Morris.
Good afternoon. This is a reservation of capacity for a new 5-lot subdivision. It's located off Mount Olive Road. And when staff performed the calculations, you can see that the amount of students generated is very low for this subdivision since it is only 5 lots. Capacity does exist to support this project, and staff would ask that this be placed on the agenda as a new business item. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Mrs. Morris?
I had just one. I thought for 5 or below, there wasn't even a requirement. So,
If you look at, there's a copy of the actual subdivision plat. If the chair could maybe scroll to that.
I got it right here. Okay, I see. There's more than 5 lots. Okay.
You can see there are 3 lots that have already been platted in this subdivision. If you remember, our ordinance says that as of 2005, you can only have 5 divisions of the property for 5 lots. Anything after that, you're subject to being a major subdivision. So this falls into that category.
Okay. Move we place this on the consent agenda.
We have a motion to place this under consent agenda. Do we have a second? We have a motion and we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Next is page 203, which is the Commerce Department sale of property at Lake Howell.
Good afternoon. We were approached by Mr. Kenneth Meismer about repurchasing some property that the county had originally purchased from his family in, I believe, 1986. That's correct. When it was originally purchased, this is property on the north side of Lake Howell. Part of the property was bought to possibly relocate Shimpock Road, and the contract to purchase was written with the idea that if that road was not relocated and it was determined there was no public need for the property, that it would be sold back to the family at the original purchase price. In fact, it adds that as a Part D to the original purchase contract. Unfortunately, and we felt like we could have handled that just as a contract, but unfortunately it included a provision that was only for the first 10 years after the original purchase. So now for that to take place, it has to come back before you. Mr. Meismer is proposing to repurchase 1.31 acres, and he would like to do that at that original purchase price of $2,906.13 per acre. I will say Mr. Meismer intended to be here, but he was confused and thought the meeting was on Tuesday because your last work session was a Tuesday because of Labor Day. I think he did, as I said, he did intend to be here and does intend to be here for your regular meeting.
Any questions for Mr. Marshall? I did hear you say, or I thought I heard you say, that there was an agreement that if it was not being used, or if the county was not going to be able to use it for whatever reason, that we would sell it back at the original sales price.
There was.
Or purchase price.
That agreement was only good for 10 years, however, so it does come back before you, and it is up to you what you would choose to be that or if you choose to sell it to them, what that price is up to the Board of Commissioners. The Water and Sewer Authority, I always consult with them on these items, with their staff that manages the reservoir for us. We have not wanted to sell land in the past because it's all been part of the buffer area, and we didn't want to have that precedent. In this case, this portion of the land was really sold more for a relocation to Shimpock rather than for buffer area. So it makes sense. It is an exception that we believe makes sense, and they did not have an objection to the resale to the family.
Mr. Chairman, if I could weigh in on this for
Yes.
just a moment. When that contract was drawn, I think back in 2001, or whatever the date was on it.
1986.
Excuse me, 1986. The reason that 10-year provision was put in there, it appears, is because of some local legislation that Cabarrus County had that said if property was condemned, it needed to be, and then it was determined that it was surplus and the county had no public need for it, that it would be reoffered to the original owner or their heirs. So I think this was not condemned, rather it was a negotiated sale. So that actual local legislation didn't really apply to this situation, so there was no need really to have to put the 10-year limitation on it. So if the board is inclined to want to work something out with the Meismers, you could certainly amend the original contract from back in 1986 and take out that provision for the 10 years and then work it out in that fashion. Otherwise, it would end up going under the regular statutes for sale of surplus property, which means it wouldn't necessarily go back. You couldn't necessarily work something out with them. So I think that appears to be the reason that was put in, but I don't think it really applies in this situation because it was not a property that was condemned. It was actually negotiated, and there was a contract.
So what you're saying is the better way to handle this situation would be to amend the original contract to remove the 10-year clause?
Yes. That is, if you want to work something out with the Meismer family. Otherwise, like I say, I think what would happen is it would end up having to be sold under the statutes for a sale of surplus property, which would basically be a public sale of some sort.
Well, I would be inclined to amend the contract. I mean, I think that's only fair. You look at the picture, the property, and I can't imagine that anybody else would really want to buy that one little acre for any other reason, and it seems like that was the intent to begin with. So I think it's fine to put it under consent personally, but it's whatever you think.
Yeah. We have a motion to place this under consent agenda. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next matter we have is the CDBG Scattered Site Program Public Hearing, found on page 213.
Good afternoon.
Mrs. Sifford.
I'll just quickly run across the program guidelines for the viewing audience. We're just doing our second public hearing at the meeting. This is a full housing rehab program for the individuals and families that are 50% the median income for the area. Are there any questions?
The first public hearing we had last month. This is the
Correct.
second.
Yes.
And then next month is when we will,
We will make a submission for
Okay.
the project.
any questions? We have a motion to
I-
place this under new business?
So moved, along with calling for the public hearing.
Thank you. We have a motion and second to place this under new business and call for a public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion
you.
carries. Thank you, Mrs. Sifford. Next, we have legal staff commerce. This is too long to. Mrs. Morris, can you explain to us what you're here for?
I can, I hope. You have two different items in front of you, actually. One is the information that Rich and I presented before about the Permit Extension Act and that option that you have to extend the approvals for projects by 1 year to give it a new expiration date at some point in the future. And then the second part of this is, if you all remember back in March, you adopted a resolution allowing folks to move or to ask to move their voluntary mitigation payment from prior to platting to permitting, and that resolution expired last Thursday. So we need to talk a little bit about whether or not you all want to proceed with amending that resolution or adopting a new resolution. So we can start with the first one, the Permit Extension Act. You have several items that should have been in your packet. One is a memo, just giving you the same information that we had before. But I did work with the other jurisdictions to find out who was going to proceed and move forward with the extensions and who was not. Concord, Kannapolis, and Harrisburg are all granting the 1-year extension. Midland said that they had intended to, but they did not provide specific dates. And Locust is still undecided on what they are going to do with the 2 projects that they have. So you have the large spreadsheet that you have is the list that we talked about, going through and identifying what the new expiration dates would be from the projects that were provided by the other jurisdictions. Cabarrus County dates have not been modified to reflect the 1-year extension. And then you also have a list that shows the date that the last permit was issued in the subdivisions, and that was actually in your packet materials. It's not a separate copy. So you can see that with the Cabarrus County projects, there are about 13 projects that would qualify for an additional 1-year extension under that session law. And then based on the fact that the other folks have extended the subdivision and preliminary plat approvals, typically the consent agreements run concurrently with those expiration dates.
Have we been contacted by any of these developers about what they're trying to do with their property?
We have not. The best that I could do was the ones that are highlighted in orange. Those are projects where we are not showing that any building permits have been issued yet. So you can see, for example, Bridgepoint Phase 6, that was a separate phase from the first Bridgepoint development. That was approved in 2006. Harrisburg will have to carry that on the books until 2012, and they haven't issued any permits in that particular phase yet.
And what we're talking about is just the ones in the county.
That's correct. The ones in the county, and then also the consent agreements for projects in the county and reservations of capacity for projects in the county, which under the past legislation, they were granted a 1-year extension because they were good for 1 year. So we would pursue the same methodology if you all decide to go ahead and move forward with the 1-year extension.
If we do not move forward with an extension, how does it affect the developer if they want to come back 6 months from now, 2 months from now, and start developing their property?
The development currently, if you remember, we talked at that last meeting that the last session law was mandatory. So the dates that you see would be the date that the developer would have until to submit a final plat to us to extend the development for an additional 2 years. If they let that expire, then they would have to start over with the development.
Okay. Commissioner Minor?
Well, my comments are going to attach to the next issue that she's going to talk about too. I don't know of any legal way that we can approach these developers and have them commit one way or another to whether they're going to ever do these projects. And I don't guess there's any way you can hold them to that. But we certainly don't want to discourage any kind of construction work right now. You know, everything we're seeing is very small, but it would be great if somebody felt strong enough to come out with a substantial project at this time. One of the things, and the connection to the adequate facilities fee is that is an extra cost, and costs are one of the things that are holding people back right now. I don't know the answer to that puzzle, but as long as we have all of these orange subdivisions, they're already in line for school space. And some new developer or some developer in the list who's having to pay the adequate facilities fee might not have to pay that fee if we didn't have these other folks holding up the queue. So it's a complicated issue. I don't know what the answer is to it. But as I've said many times, the numbers we're using for our schools are just so nebulous that really don't make any sense to me anymore. But you know, is there any conceivable way? Can anybody be creative or tell us how we can know or eliminate any of these projects? Or how can we? Is there a way that we can help the people that are ready to go and not have to have them wait on the people, not, you know, be held up financially by the ones who may never occur? It's a really complicated issue.
And the dates that you see where it says the development order, the legislated expiration, that last column, that's the date that we would have to carry these projects on the books based on the mandated legislation.
The burnt or dark pink or whatever, the last column?
Yes. Those are the dates that are already mandated by the session law that was passed last year. The dates that you see would be extended by 1 year if you decided to move forward with the optional legislation from this year.
Well, let's take the Arbor Oaks. We have a date in blue, but we don't have a date in pink. So has that expired?
That particular project would be, you know, they're continuing to final plat. So the expiration dates that you have are on preliminary plats. So brand new developments that would be moving, that have not had any action at this point.
So we have no expiration date on Arbor Oaks.
Right, you can see where it said, where the column where it has APF status, you can see that their APF terms are actually complete. That's an older subdivision. It was approved in 2002.
Okay.
So that legislation really applies to approvals that existed January 1st of 2008 through December 31st of 2010. So you can see a lot of these are from 2003, 2004, 1999, 2001. So a lot of them are older subdivisions that are still, that either platted or that just have a small amount of lots left to plat.
Look at the next one, Look at the next one, Ashbrook, because that one's in orange. Okay, and it has APF terms are complete. No permits have been issued, but there's in the blue column, it's 98, but there's nothing under reservation of capacity or under the pink column. So what does that one mean? Is that one we don't think is going to happen, but we don't know?
That is one where is an older subdivision, and in our new system, it didn't count, there's no way to count old permits, if that makes sense. So there's activity, but it's old. So where you see that, this is actually used mainly for tracking APF and voluntary mitigation payments. So where you see it's pre-APF, they would not have been subject to a payment. Where the APF terms are complete, they had something different that they had to do, or it's built out. And that's where, unfortunately, with combining the two systems together, some of the number of permits have been lost. But just to show you all the complete picture of what we're dealing with, I left it on there so that you understand all of the different subdivisions that come into play.
So those are some of those phantom ones that we don't know that'll necessarily get built, but we have to count them, as Commissioner Minot commented on the reservation of capacity, and that's 105 lots that may or may not ever get done, but we still have to keep them in there in the event they are done.
Yes.
So
And
is
if
there
you-
any point in time that that one actually falls off completely?
If they have if they have preliminary platted, and that's where this isn't counting permits, and if you want more research, I can go back and do that, because it counts permits. So if it's not recognizing permits in the system associated with that subdivision, it's not going to show it. But it was approved back in 1998. So, more than likely there are permits there, and it may, they have completed the APF terms, so the development more than likely is also complete.
Yeah, in Ashbrook, that's the subdivision on Flow Store where they went in, it looked like they were building a plant there and just stripped everything off. What was that? It's on the left-hand side, right as you go down Flow Store Road. That's the one where they went in and basically just cut the whole hill and everything down flat, just a flat surface, and just built the houses on the flat, on one level.
Yeah,
That's
so
been
you
there.
could.
That's built out, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, where it says, so the two things are a little different, because where it says APF terms complete,
Yeah.
the subdivision is, they've done what they needed to do for APF purposes, and we didn't necessarily have the permits in the system.
Okay.
But this is to give you an idea of, if the APF terms are complete, then the subdivision more than likely is off the books at this point.
Yeah, okay.
Same thing, if it says pre-APFO, that means they weren't subject to any type of consent agreement. If it's pending, then it's one we know about, but they haven't actually been through the process yet.
Okay.
So it is a little bit confusing,
Yeah.
but that's the best data that we have at this point. Because like I said, this is mainly used for tracking APF and APF payments.
Are the pre-APFO subdivisions numbers used in calculating APFO?
Yes, they are. If there are remaining lots, then it is considered, because that space is available for students. So for example, Abington in Harrisburg is part of, is part of that calculation. Because the schools look at the subdivisions that go to that high school feeder school.
I think that you raised a lot of issues that are a big concern, Commissioner Minot. What I think may be the best thing to do at this point in time is if we can table it for at least a month. And during that time, if our staff can get in touch with the building industry as well as the chamber and see if there's a way that dialogue can be done so that we can either figure out what projects are not going to move forward, then we can take them off and not harm that developer. If there is a way to help that developer in a different way, then maybe we can accomplish that. But I think that I'm not comfortable in making a decision today or in 2 weeks, nor do I think the information can be provided to us in 2 weeks. But I do think that over the next 30 days, if we can at least get some headway in regards to working with the building industry and finding out what's the best way to help them, but also recognize what it's doing to us in regards to school building. And I think the chamber can be a big part of that through Mr. Cox and his organization.
And I guess I have a question for Rich. If maybe you could talk about this a little bit. The ones that have the valid approvals that were subject to the 2009 legislation, we would have to recognize those projects, correct?
Absolutely, and remember, under that legislation, it basically took what they had left in terms of remaining time under their development approval as of January 1st, 2008. Whatever they had left on that date, you add to the end after December 31st, 2010. So it's not a finite cutoff date for all those. And you have to go and individually calculate those based on how, whatever time they had remaining at that point. But that's, we've taken the position, even though that legislation did not specifically mention consent agreements for an APFO, certainly all the other language in it would seem to have clearly included that type of a development approval. So that's the position the county's taken on all those.
So the ones where you see those dates, they're subject to that legislation and would have to be carried on the books at least through that expiration date. And during that time, they would have the ability to final plat part of the development, and then it would be an automatic 2-year extension based on our platting process.
And just as a practical matter, those development approvals, carry some legal rights attached to them, and typically under our consent agreement, we've allowed other developers to take an assignment of those rights. We've done that, a number of times in the past on consent agreements. So you have something that is arguably saleable or a commodity, and I think you may find that the developers that are still viable that feel that they still have that asset that they could transfer and maybe get some value out of it would be reluctant just to acknowledge that, at least for themselves, they're not going to carry through with their development, but they may want to sell it to somebody else.
Two questions. What about the case of the developer whose development has gone back to the bank? Then they no longer own any interest in that. And I know that the development rights can go with the property, but do we necessarily have to allow them to have the APFO standing? Or can we change that locally? Or does that have to be, is that part of the law that you're referring to? That's one piece.
That's a good question. It may depend on how it went back to the bank.
It could eliminate some of these. I'm thinking particularly of Pleasant Oaks, which is, I think, going back to the bank, 170 lot.
I think if they actually did a completed foreclosure and the bank or whoever purchased the property at foreclosure acquired the property in that fashion, I don't know that they acquire those rights. Right. So, but if it was say conveyed back to them voluntarily, then it may well. I think you'd have to look at the nature of the transaction to be able to evaluate it in that circumstance.
So in the time that Commissioner White is talking about trying to look at this, maybe we need to find a way to find out which ones of these are going back, are being foreclosed, because there's,
That's noted on here. The only ones that staff in the different jurisdictions are aware of that are currently controlled by banks are the ones that are highlighted and that have an asterisk next to them. And speaking to your specific example, Commissioner Minette, Pleasant Oaks has actually been annexed into the city of Concord, and they are recognizing that 1 year extra that 1 additional year. So that project, based on Concord's authority, is good until 2013. But you can see there are just a handful, that the different staff are aware of that are controlled by the banks or that the banks are now looking after.
I don't want to run my point in the ground, but I just want to reiterate that if you had 50 lots, you're talking about $400,000 to a builder if they have to be in the APFO, and yet there may be seats available in that school for a long time that are being held up by somebody else. Now, that's what I think we need to look at.
Commissioner Poole?
I was going to say, do you make a motion to
I think if we
table
do
this?
if we do a table, we can address some of the concerns that Commissioner Minot has, and also think it gives an opportunity for us to be in touch with the Builders Association and see how some of these issues can be worked out instead of just blanketly turned down or blanketly pass and not have the full information about what either decision does to us in the long term to the detriment of a lot of people, or to the, we just need to understand what all of our decisions are, and I think it also gives us an idea to flesh it out.
Yeah.
So if we can have a motion to table it.
I'll make a motion to table
Or what
it.
we can do is, let's make a motion to place it on the November calendar, so we don't lose track of it, and that would be November the 1st, so we don't lose track of it. We have a motion to place
I'll do
this on the
that.
November the 1st work session. Do we have a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Morris. Next matter we have is on page, there's another one, sorry. A related item.
Yeah, the second part of this item is whether or not you all, again, the resolution was good until September 30th. We have not had any developers come forward that have asked for this. We've talked to one developer about the potential of falling under the resolution. And, you all had asked around the time that it was going to expire for staff to bring it back so that you could reconsider what you wanted to do with the resolution, if you wanted to allow it to expire, or if you wanted to consider a different resolution or a different option.
And since the economic conditions haven't really changed since you first put this in place, then we would suggest that you consider just extending it for at least another 6 months.
So do we want to go ahead and put that on this month, or do we?
I think we put this on for the 18th under consent agenda, extending it for another 6 months.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Morris. The next matter we have is Department of Social Services Local Workforce Plan Amendments. I call on Mr. Rose, Director of Department of Social Services.
Good afternoon. What we have before you are some recommended changes to our Work First plan regarding the programs of emergency assistance, 200%, and services to non-custodial parents. These programs are short-term emergency assistance programs that assist Work First clients in a crisis situation. They have two main purposes. They either help to maintain employment if the client is in a predicament where they need some assistance, or they may lose their job. And the program also will help those that have lost a job or have hours cut to help them get through these times and get them back on their feet. We are asking for these changes because we have combined all our emergency assistance programs and short-term programs into one unit now. And these changes will bring consistency amongst all the programs that we have, including the crisis intervention program and general assistance. We have structured these changes to so that the programs are tightened up a little bit. As you see on the chart, you kind of see the before and after. The changes will bring about more requirements for clients to provide documentation of their crisis. It will also help them or require them to participate in our financial counseling classes, which we have started in a collaboration with 4-H that has been very successful. We've served about 34 clients at this point with that program.
Can you talk about that program a little bit more, Mr. Rose?
Sure. This has been a big one of mine, and thanks to Debbie here and thanks to Debbie and 4-H, we have collaborated to basically set up it's a program that has 2 sessions. I believe they're involved about 2 to 3 hours each session, and it provides all kind of economic and financial counseling to clients that are getting our services. And the premise here is that if they need our services, we need to give them some tools to help them keep having to come back 6 months later, a year later, as we were finding. Basically, we were finding a lot of clients just coming in annually. It was like clockwork. Even noted some clients talking about their account. You know, we wanted to really change the focus of these programs and make them more proactive and preventive in that nature. So that's why we've been doing. We started financial counseling classes about 3 months ago, I believe, and they have been very, very successful so far. So we will incorporate this requirement with these programs as well. And especially when it comes to services to non-custodial parents, that will be an excellent program because these are parents that may be paying child support, so helping them budget their money so that they can both afford child support and to afford a way to live will be a positive thing for them. One other change that we have made that's been very major in a lot of ways is we no longer pay for deposits for utility connections, which it just makes no sense to pay for a deposit that the client may get back at a future time. So we only pay for the actual utility bill at this time, and they need to have a disconnect notice now across all programs to get that assistance. So with that, we have had our consultant look at these changes. She was fine with them. The DSS board reviewed them at the September meeting, and they supported these changes. And we need your seal of approval, and we'll send the changes to the state and implement this immediately once they get state approval.
Any questions for Mr. Rose?
How do we, how do we publicize this program? I mean, I know that
Does it
you
need
have churches all the
publication?
time.
We don't need public. Our citizens.
Well, I'm saying
are-
not general public, this is general public, but I mean, publicized in that way, but I know that there's a lot of churches and stuff that have members that sometimes may be in crisis.
That's correct.
And the pastors and people like that may not
Right.
realize that something like this may exist, that, you know, that I don't know how we get that word out quietly or.
We do a
not so
lot of,
quietly
it.
to
We do a lot of
outreach to the.
Yes, we have Amanda
faith community
Buck,
stuff.
Kathy Maurer, they do a lot of outreach to churches and private nonprofits and so forth, so they go out and talk about the programs, and like I said, and, you know, we have a lot of people that know they're there, know how to use them very well.
Okay.
These programs, if you combine the total assistance between all these programs across the board, it's well over $1 million that we administer in assistance throughout the course of a year in all these programs.
One thing, I was not able to attend the September 23rd board meeting, but the prior board meeting, Mrs. Buck has taken on the challenge by Mr. Rose to coordinate volunteer efforts for the Department of Social Services. And what she has been able to do is not only work with the Department of Social Services, but Mrs. Hawkins, Amy Hawkins, has been instrumental in working to provide or identify volunteer efforts throughout the county on many different programs as opposed to just the Department of Social Services. So it's a very good effort that Mrs. Buck has taken on to not only help the Department of Social Services, but other volunteer efforts throughout the county as a coordinated effort, and just to let everybody know about that.
So would this go on the consent agenda?
Yes, we can place it under consent agenda. So
I
we have a
would make a
motion.
motion to place it under consent agenda.
We have a motion, we have a second? We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Rose.
Thank you very much.
Next matter we have is on page 234, which is the resolution, possibly resolution permitting pyrotechnics display. And I will call on Mr. Langer at this time.
Good afternoon. What we brought before you is a resolution that would grant the authority to the City of Kannapolis, Concord, and Harrisburg the ability to permit pyrotechnic displays within their corporate limits. Everything within the unincorporated areas of the county, including the town of Mount Pleasant and Midland, will still be done through or by county staff.
Any questions, Mr. Langer?
Yeah, just a couple. One of them is, why, I mean, what is,
How's
kind of
this-
weird.
how's
because
this
it's
come
kind of
about?
backwards- It's kind of backwards from everything you ever see, because it's very rarely the counties get to intervene. I mean, what is the logic originally why we had to grant a permission to this, or to give the cities the authority to do this?
Well, what's happened is about, I think it was about 2 years ago, there was an explosion as a fireworks company was getting ready for a display. And through the investigation, it was determined that the permit was improperly issued, that the County Board of Commissioners had never approved the permit, or they had not granted the authority to do so. What has happened is through numerous meetings through OSFM, State Fire Marshal's Office, and training events, this has been brought up, that a large majority of the cities are not in compliance with the state law, which would require the county to approve all permits unless that authority has been delegated. So what has happened is the city of Kannapolis and Harrisburg had requested that we do a resolution so that they could issue those permits.
Well, you just said they're not in compliance. Why would we cede authority to them when they're not in compliance?
Well, I mean, this is something that they have been doing. It's, I mean, a lot of cities are not in compliance with the general statute because they're issuing the permits without the delegated authority from the county. The general statute allows the county Board of Commissioners to delegate that authority to the cities to be able to issue the permits.
So it's not as a safety issue that they're not in compliance. They're not in compliance because they're issuing a permit that they have no authority to issue.
That's correct.
Okay.
I think they just assumed, because usually that jurisdiction
Has
is
their own.
separated in most
Right.
statutes. I don't think they were aware that under this particular statute, that the county retains jurisdiction over the entire county, including the incorporated areas, for approval of fireworks permits. And I think they assumed they had that jurisdiction, when in fact they did not, because there was never a resolution from this board allowing them to do that, which is permitted under the statute.
It was my concern, when I heard noncompliance, I was thinking that it was not, it was a safety issue, that they're not requiring the
People get-
displayer to be safe.
Yeah.
And if they're not, then why are we going to give them the authority?
If they're not.
Right. Commissioner
Why-
Minot.
I guess-
Why would we not have Mount Pleasant and Midland on here just as well, just to make it?
Because the city of Kannapolis, Harrisburg, and Concord, and that's another issue where, like Rich was saying, they've assumed they had the authority to do it. The state fire code requires that you have a level 3 certified fire inspector to inspect all fireworks shows, and those municipalities have certified people to do that. The town of Midland and Mount Pleasant do not, and we take care of that for them.
I guess the question kind of, so have they asked us then for this authority, or are we pretty
Yes.
much okay? I guess I got a question, Mr. Downs and Spot. I know we've been talking to them about the radios. Are they proceeding forward with that?
Bob, or Commissioner Minot, we can talk about that at a later time.
Well, I thought maybe, well, I mean, if they want.
This, I think it's two different things.
No, I mean, I'm just.
So we just ask that you place it on the consent agenda for approval.
So moved.
Do we have a motion? Okay. We have a motion to place this on our consent agenda in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next matter we have is page 237. and that is the Food Policy Council update, local food purchasing policy, and the 10% campaign. I call on Mr. Newton, Mrs. Trish Kramer, who is the chair, and Mrs. Bost. And for all of those who are not here today, we've had the distinct pleasure of having some local foods brought in that I hope that Mr. Newton or Mrs. Bost or Mrs. Kramer will be able to enlighten us about what we have been able to taste and enjoy.
Sure. Well, good afternoon. I'm here today primarily, although we will get to the food, to give you all an update on the Food Policy Council that you created this past spring. The council has been mainly involved with 4 items, the first of which has been taking care of the specific items within the resolution that created the council. This includes the election of a chairperson and vice chairperson. Tricia Kramer is the council's first chairperson. Chad Von Cannon is vice chairperson. Chad couldn't be here with us this evening, but he is in spirit. That's his Italian sausage that you'll be having this evening if you make it over there. So, staff has made recommendations for bylaws for the Food Policy Council, and they're being reviewed by Council Member David Bettendorf. Staff has also made recommendations for standing subcommittees, and they're being reviewed by Bonnie Silvers, another Food Policy Council member. And we'll be reviewing those at the upcoming October meeting on the 14th. We may be voting on them at that time. Secondly, the Food Policy Council helped to design, create, and staff a local food booth at the fair this year with a lot of help from county employees and from the Extension Office, so we greatly appreciate that. But we actually had Policy Council members during each night of the fair out explaining what's going on in Cabarrus County in terms of local food. This year, we were able to put on display not only some of the wonderful vegetables and fruits that we produce in Cabarrus County, but also some of the meat and the dairy products as well. We also had 2 of our council members who are professional chefs on site in the booth cooking and providing samples of local food for people who came through Gold Hall 1 during the weekend, days of the weekend for the fair. Really well received. I'm going to let Debbie maybe talk a little bit more about that later on. But just so you know, this booth included information about the Food Policy Council itself, about the community food assessment that we're going through right now, the Elma C. Lomax Incubator Farm, the Cruise Meats Harvest Facility, our Piedmont Farmers Market and the upgrades that they've been doing over the past year, the Know Your Farms Charlotte Regional Food Tour, and we had 5 farmers on that tour this 2 weekends ago, 5 Cabarrus family farms on that tour, as well as the 10% local campaign, which I think we're going to talk about a little more in just a few minutes. The third item is the Cabarrus County's community food assessment that I mentioned. I'm sorry that I had to, I couldn't provide that for you as an attachment, but that's one of the 2 items that you have. Let me back up. The other item you have, the small green item, is promotional material that was created specifically for the, in support of the 10% campaign. I included it because we handed a lot of these out at the fair. But back to the community food assessment. If you'll remember, food assessment is going to take place in 2 phases. Phase 1 is primarily a quantitative phase addressing issues of data. We mined U.S. Department of Agriculture, North Carolina Department of Agriculture, Census Bureau information, as well as some of our local sources. And this community food assessment is being handled primarily by the Center for Environmental Farming Systems. They're under contract to do this assessment, but they're doing it with the help of the Cooperative Extension and also the Food Policy Council. What you're holding is an executive summary of Phase 1, which is now complete. The Food Policy Council was given a full presentation of Phase 1, the quantitative phase of our community food assessment, in August. And this is the resulting document that just gives you a really brief assessment. I'm certainly not going to read the whole thing to you. The introduction explains the context, food system components, and the methodology that the assessment's using. But the meat of the executive summary is in specific key items that came to light during Phase 1. production characteristics, farming population, farm size and characteristics, economic opportunities, market access, and natural resources. So I'll let you read through this at your leisure, but for each of those key items, there's information that gives the background regarding that specific item, but then what it also does is recommends issues to be explored and questions that need to be answered. And that's setting us up for phase 2 of the community food assessment, which will be more qualitative. What we're hoping to do is to drill down on these key items by interviewing about 70 to 75% of the relevant citizens here in Cabarrus County regarding those key issues and questions. And we're also planning 2 group forums that will help small group of people get together to help answer some of these questions and address these key items. Timeline-wise, we're hoping for a full report back to the commissioners in June of 2011. There'll be a document, of course, but there'll also be a presentation that we'd like to, that Center for Environmental and Farming Systems would like to come and give, as well as giving that presentation to the public as well. Does anybody have any questions about the food assessment, phase 1, the summary? And again, I apologize for not having that material to you in advance. I'd be happy to answer any questions that come up between now and the regular session or even beyond that.
Some of the questions I've had, that if it's going to be addressed later, that's fine, but you know, what are we doing for our farmers? And I talked to people about the Elm C. Lomax Incubator Farm and the importance of trying to, those who want to learn to become farmers have the opportunity to do that. Second is, well, it costs too much to become a farmer. And I try and dissuade them of that from what little I've known and what I've tried to figure out. But the third one is that has been very difficult to try and explain is, well, you can't make a living on 100, you know, unless you have 100 or 200 acres. And can you talk about what a typical size of a farm is that you can actually provide for your family and make a living?
That's going to depend specifically on what you're producing. But what we found is, so if you look at the food system components, and this is included in the introduction, you're looking at production systems, but also processing, distribution, marketing, and then ultimately the way we recycle and compost our waste. But what we found is that qualitative portion of the food assessment probably needs to focus most on distribution, processing, and marketing, which it helps the farmers actually get the product, you know, to the consumer in a way that helps them to make a living. So, and I'm not trying to dodge your question, but what I'm saying is it's different trying to sell tomatoes for a living at a farmer's market than to try and sell tomato sauce to restaurants. Or there are multiple channels for the processing and distribution that would make our farmers more successful that we could develop. Some of them are already being developed. We could help figure out where to put our emphasis, our time and our money and our energy by identifying which ones are working best now, which ones we're totally lacking, which ones the farmers themselves are saying, hey, we really need this, and if we just had this one help with this one component of that process, we could be more successful and make more money even if we're only on a farm of 10 acres. Yeah, the value-added component.
Okay. Another thing is that we've read in the paper in the last 30 days about a local community that's asking, or a local group that's asking for $1 million to develop a farmer's market. Are y'all going to be asking us for $1 million to develop a farmer's market?
I can safely say we will not be asking you for $1 million to develop a farmer's market.
I mean, do you need that with what we have in infrastructure needs? Well, what we have in infrastructure in regards to the farmers markets that we currently have, you know, is that even on the horizon?
Piedmont Farmers Market Board is right now considering expansion of the Weinkauf market, physical expansion of infrastructure. During that process, they've recognized that expanding that specific site may not be the best use of funds, their funds or other privately solicited funds, and they may come and ask you for money, but
right.
We won't. I think that there are opportunities wherever possible to take advantage of existing infrastructure that wouldn't require capital investment by the county or by local or by cities within the county. I was in Bloomington, Indiana last weekend, and one of the reasons that their Saturday market is so successful is it's next door to civic space. Well, that civic space is used almost every weekend by a group who's putting on a dance-a-thon or a what have you, and that draws a certain amount of people. It creates much more of an atmosphere to the market itself. The market's able to borrow that space, if you will, without paying anything for it, without doing anything. Those sorts of relationships might be explored as Piedmont Farmers Market figures out what a 21st century farmers market looks like. I think there's also the opportunity, and this will be explored in the processing and distribution components of the food system of this process. A farmers market could also include the pickup for a community-supported agriculture program. It could include a lot more processed food than we currently see. It could include vendors who are cooking food for people, prepared foods for people who visit the market. We could program in more, they could program in more of the entertainment so that we were able to partner with people who do things like the arts folks who come downtown Concord every spring, so they could take advantage of each other and potentially share space. I think all of those sort of potential relationships will come up during this second phase of the community food assessment.
And then-
In answer to your question, Jay, though, about farming and access to capital and those kinds of resources, one of the things that we're trying to help everyone focus on as you look at the aging population of farmers, Farm Transition Network is coming in to help us deliver a series of programs to our older farmers that don't want their land to be developed, that wants to help someone else farm it, to transition beginning farmers and people who want to farm larger tracts of land to transition onto that land, the tax advantages, the conservation principles involved, those kinds of things. And so we're all working together to make those opportunities available to everyone also, because that access to land is critical. And so that's one component in the program that, if you look around the United States, is lacking, and one that we're trying to stay ahead of, so that we've got the people that want access to the land, they can get to the land that the people already have available that they don't want developed. So we're working on that. That'll start happening November the 4th. Andrew Brandon is coming on November the 4th to start that series of workshops.
And there's already several restaurants, locally owned restaurants, that are purchasing locally grown food.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, there are several. Just farming population was one of the 6 key items that they identified here in the first phase as needing attention. It's something we already knew, but this helps us qualify or quantify exactly how big the need is and how much attention and resources we should put on that problem. Lastly, the Food Policy Council will be voting at our upcoming meeting on a local food purchasing policy, which was an attachment to the agenda. It was a document, the draft of the local food purchasing policy was created by staff members of Cabarrus County with help from Food Policy Council, but the council is currently reviewing the policy and is hoping to vote to recommend that the Board of Commissioners adopt this policy. I won't read the whole thing to you, but I can shorten it to one sentence, which is included in the official policy, which is Cabarrus County government employees shall locally source 10% of all food served at county catered events and small department-sponsored meetings from food producers within North Carolina. And this falls in line with the 10% local campaign for which Cabarrus County has already signed on. But what this would do is have all of our events require that 10% participation to bring us in line with our pledge to do so. We'd start with county government, and we're going to be rolling this policy out to the public as well, but this gives us a chance to say, hey, this is something the county has pledged, this is something the county is already doing to try and support people within North Carolina, but as much as we can within Cabarrus County in terms of support for local food producers.
Just one question. I was looking at page 11, you talk about the livestock, the major importance in the surrounding region, and you talk about us being one of the 11 counties in the southern Piedmont region, and all those counties here. Also, that area, does that include now, because I think you have a large concentration of contract poultry growers, that either turkey or chicken in those counties. Is that what is included in that number there?
The statistics that Sydney was able to garner, and they talk about the 89% of the majority of the region's market sales is livestock. That does include poultry,
Okay.
and primarily you're talking about the Union, Anson, Montgomery, Richmond areas in Scotland. Are the big poultry producers in this area, but that does include that number, yes.
Okay.
The full report next June will go into much more depth in terms of the actual numbers. There's a lot of meat in there, if you will.
Okay, and the 10% local campaign, the Center for Environmental Farming Systems and North Carolina Cooperative Extension kicked off the 10% local campaign back in August, and we did do a kickoff at the Harrisburg Farmers Market, and we've, as a result of the little bit of promotion that we've done on that program, and there is designated one extension faculty member in each county that is your 10% local coordinator, and I am the one for Cabarrus County. And there are 7 institutions or businesses signed up in Cabarrus County, and we have access to that information through I have access to that through the 10% local listserv. There are also 98 individuals in Cabarrus County that have signed up since the kickoff. And we are one of the larger counties. Now, of course, Wake, Chatham, Orange, those counties have a much larger enrollment at this point, but we were notified because we had 67 enroll between September the 4th and September the 20th. So our campaign at the fair worked because they said, how did you, in a 2-week period of time, get 67 people to sign up? And the good thing was, and what we found with the kickoff at the farmers market is, if you have a computer there with live internet that allows people to sign up right then, they will do so. Because all that they ask for is your email address and the zip code where you live, so that they can designate, they have a way to classify what county you live in. But if you have to take something home and think about doing it later, you're usually not going to do it. So what we found to be successful is physically having a computer there allowed people to access the website and enroll with their email address. And what happens is you get a weekly email to that email address asking how much money did you spend on local food, and and it'll tell you what portion of that food budget was spent locally. And they ask what farms did you buy from, where did you access that information. They also have the opportunity for you to offset if you grow your own food. If you say that you're not purchasing it, but you're growing it yourself, then you have a chance to offset that and show how much you're growing locally. And the businesses get a weekly email as well. Our restaurant does, and says, okay, how much did you buy locally? Where did you buy it from? Where was it sourced? How did you use it? If you didn't buy locally, why not? And so it generates the information that comes up in the box on the front of that 10% local campaign website that is, just a really beautiful website that gives you access to all the local farms, etc. Everybody logged in, everybody has access to it. It's just really great. We're going to kick off the 10% local campaign to employees at the Employee Health and Benefits Fair tomorrow and Friday at the Governmental Center and at DSS, and we'll have a computer. They can sign up. Piedmont Farmers Market's going to be there to talk about where you can source food, and we're going to have access. I'll have samples and a number of different things so that we help the employees start to think about the health benefits of fresh local foods and how to prepare them and those kinds of things. So we're really excited about the possibility. John was one of the very first people to sign up. Cabarrus County government has signed up in all three of the different categories for the 10% local campaign, and that is sourcing food locally, promotion and outreach, as well as helping employees be involved in the 10% local campaign. So, and as a result of that, Cabarrus County Schools Child Nutrition Program has signed up. And so, as I said, we've got 7 institutions or businesses throughout the county that have enrolled, and we're going to do an outreach to the businesses once we get everything on board for what we need to do with the public.
Have you thought about touching base with the catering businesses in this county?
Yes, and that's part of the outreach to the businesses,
Okay.
yes. Mhm.
And are you working with the Chamber of Commerce to help you do this outreach?
And we
Because they're already
will,
set up to do it.
we will
and
once we're
it's
ready to,
logical.
when we're ready to promote all that. What we're trying to do as county staff is put together a full campaign. We're rolling it out in stages so that we've got a way to make sure that the information is out there and available to everybody so that all questions are answered and you have access to a full range of information. Accessing it is one thing, being able to understand how to cook it with appropriate recipes is something else. And so what we're trying to do is build up that program so that hopefully in the next couple of months we can roll it out to all the businesses. And what we're doing is rolling it out to people as we get everything on board, so we can do that hopefully in the next couple of months.
The 10% local food campaign, I think the numbers I was looking at would, if we were to sign up, or as people sign up, it certainly helps tremendously locally. It compounds dollars for our local economy. Is that correct?
It does, yes, absolutely.
What you're looking at is a statewide $35 billion spent on food every year in North Carolina. So the math, at 10%, we would be pumping $3.5 billion into the state's economy, which is a pretty significant number. And also, the more families and businesses and institutions that sign up, the more money, and it tracks the money, you can see the dollar amount on the website. The more money that's recognized as having been in the local food system, probably would have been already. This is going to help some people get more involved, but some are already doing this work. That's just more leverage for us as we're trying to make decisions. We're trying to get statewide policies or legislation passed that helps to serve our local farmers. We can point to this number and this participation and say, look, this is real. It's a real movement. It's not a pie-in-the-sky idea. People want to know where their food comes. They want to eat more locally. Here's proof.
And one of the other key things that we had a 10% local webinar a couple Fridays ago, and one of the things we were not able to do previously was access the individual information or those individual emails by county, but they're putting that system in place to allow us to do that so that we can put them on an email listserv. If Aaron is working on a monthly newsletter that he looks at me funny.
No, I didn't.
If somebody works on a monthly newsletter with tips on, or with tips on cooking or recipes or the seasonality of the produce, because people don't understand that you can't get strawberries out of the field in North Carolina all year round. And those that you buy in the grocery store of them have been grown in a greenhouse or come from somewhere else. So it's it's information. We have access to those emails to be able to help them understand better availability, accessibility, seasonality, different recipes, events we've got coming up. We've not had access to those email addresses, but we will now. And that creates this group within Cabarrus County that we can then go to as part of this local food systems program for volunteers, for help with getting things kicked off in their local communities. And so it's this really great resource that we're really excited about having access to.
Ms. Kramer,
Yes.
how is the council growing? How is it going in regards to the members of the committee and discussion and
There's been great engagement. I think when we all had to kick in and support the recent fair, everybody really, got their families involved, they got involved, and they're just very excited and enthusiastic about where we're going.
Okay. Do you think you have the resources to move forward with with some of these things that we've been talking about and looking for?
I'll answer your question a different way. There's no resources that we're lacking at this time. I don't know what we will need as we continue to grow and develop.
Okay. Are the meetings attended well and good discussion amongst?
Absolutely. I would say of the 23 potential attendees, we typically have maybe 4 people missing, 3 to 4 people missing per meeting. And the dialogue is robust. I mean, a lot of times we have to kind of say, okay, we've got 5 minutes left and 45 minutes worth of discussion, and we kind of have to pull it back in, so.
Good. Well, this 10% local food campaign is it's exciting to me, and I'd like to have the opportunity to sign up for it if we could do that on the 18th. If I could do that at least, to see how easy it is to do. Okay. Any other questions? We have a motion to place this under new business, to consider a motion to adopt or approve the local food purchasing policy and sign up for the Farm to Fork 10% local food campaign.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just briefly, if I could, we have ostrich from Bird Brain Ranch. We have Italian breakfast sausage links from Chad Von Cannon Creekside Farms. We have ground beef burgers from T&D this evening. We've got greens from Phoenix Farms, from several farmers at the Incubator Farm. I'm going to leave someone out. We have cheese from Cackleberry Farms. I think we used some of his butter as well. So quite a few. Most of the food over there is local this evening. Please take advantage of it.
Thank you, Aaron. Let's see. Next matter we have is on page 242. Piggyback award, a bid awarded by Township of Springfield, New Jersey for TLC Integrated Library System. How you doing, Mrs. Uri? Excuse me. If you would help us out with this, because I can't speak right now. Yes, ma'am.
We're basically asking to piggyback off of a contract that the Township of Springfield, New Jersey had with TLC. TLC is the vendor that we've chosen to use for our integrated library system. If you'll remember, we've received a grant of $100,000 from the state library for this project, with the remaining funds being matched by the county.
What is the TLC Integrated Library System? What does that mean to people that are checking out library books?
TLC is the Library Corporation, and what that means is twofold. We'll have a new system for the staff to be able to check books out and manage things from the staff side. It'll make things more efficient, which we really need in terms of having shorter staff. And also from the patron side, it's a much more intuitive program for them to use to search for books, to put books on hold, to read book reviews right there online, to be able to create their own lists, and also to search our databases right there from the catalog.
So this is going to be software that you access not only at the library but online?
Exactly.
Okay. Any other questions? Or how about any questions about this? How about telling us about the remodeling? We've seen a couple of articles in the paper.
We're remodeling the Concord Library. Basically what we're going to do is take some spaces that aren't being used to their fullest potential and repurpose them. We're taking the old bookmobile garage and making that into a local history room, which will enlarge the size of our local history room, and also make it be available to the public the entire time the library is open, because it'll be adjacent to the reference staff, so we'll have staff that can move in and out of that, so it will be open at all times. We're also going to take that big bank of computers out of the center of the room, move them over to the side to increase visibility throughout the library. We're getting all new shelving, and upstairs we're going to take the gallery space and incorporate that in the children's area, which means more space for the children. And we're also taking a large storage room on the upper floor and turning that into a children's program room, so that instead of having a curtained off area for children's programs, it'll be a separate room, which will be much nicer.
Commissioner Minor?
Is the performance area with the mural and the piano, is that staying the way it is?
That will stay the way it is, yes.
Now, the funds that are being used to do this remodeling, is a lot of it, if not all of it, comes from the Miriam Hayes?
That's correct. Most of it is either from the Miriam Cannon Hayes, from her estate, or we have a few other funds. There was a Flo Family Fund, as well as some funds that transferred over from the City of Concord. And then we also have $50,000 from the Cannon Foundation.
How is the volunteer efforts at the various libraries?
They're going really well, especially at places like the Harrisburg Library. If we didn't have volunteers, it would be very difficult for us to operate. We are having multiple volunteers every day. I was at the Kannapolis Library this morning, and we had 12 volunteers come in and put in 140 hours in the month of September. So it's pretty steady and really helping us to be able to keep open as much as we're open.
Okay. Any other questions? Do we have a motion to place this under consent agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
You're not rid of me yet.
I'm not through with you.
One more.
Okay, 428, create new positions for the Smart Start Family Literacy Grant Program.
We've been given a grant from the Cabarrus Partnership for Children to start a Smart Start Family Literacy Program, and basically what this will enable us to do is hire one full-time and one part-time staff person to teach the American Library Association's Every Child Ready to Read program to parents and caregivers of children age birth through 5. Basically what it does is it teaches the parents how to read to their children, not how to read, but teaches them how to teach their children the 6 pre-reading skills necessary to begin to read. And we'll be doing the program in English and in Spanish. And the grant funding is through June 30th of 2011, with the possibility of it being renewed after that.
Any questions? We have a motion to place this under consent agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have, on page 439, is Code of Ethics, Board of Commissioners Code of Ethics placeholder. And Mrs. Honeycutt or Mr. Cook?
Yes, Session Law 2009-403 enacted a new statute, General Statute 160A-83, that requires all North Carolina cities, counties, local boards of education, unified governments, etc., to adopt a resolution or policy containing a code of ethics. It must be adopted on or before January 1st, 2011. The resolution is required to address 5 key principles. The 5 areas to be addressed are as follows: the need to obey all applicable laws regarding official actions taken as a board member, the need to uphold the integrity and independence of board members' office, the need to avoid impropriety in the exercise of the board members' official duties, the need to faithfully perform the duties of the office, and the need to conduct the affairs of the governing board in an open and public manner, including complying with all applicable laws governing open meetings and public records. The board does have a good bit of leeway in deciding what their code will contain. I have provided a couple examples in the agenda packets for review. The legislation also requires board members to take 2 hours of ethics training. Currently, city commissioners have until December 31st to complete the training. Those that will be elected in November have 1 year to complete the required training after their election. The School of Government conducts the training, and you can obtain it in a variety of methods and locations. Also on your computer, except for Chairman White's computer, we had a little technical difficulty. Fleming Bell wrote a model code, and we purchased that for reference materials, and we did provide that on your laptops today for reference and have it available if you need it. This is basically a placeholder to get it on your radar so that we get that done by the end of the year.
I think that we've got a couple of things that we need to address between now and December the 31st that might be better to set aside some time in November to discuss. And what I mean by that is not only this, but also our legislative goals for the coming year. That the session comes in, the long session starts in January, and I think it would be important for us to hammer out some of our, if not all of our legislative goals before the end of the year and be able to give those to our legislative delegates at the end of December or 1st of January before the long session begins. Come November the 2nd, a new board will have been elected. At least 2, if not 3 positions will be elected, so that my thoughts were if we can look at scheduling something in November along with the additional members to participate in those discussions, everything gets the new board as well as the current board has opportunity to discuss those issues in regards to the Code of Ethics as well as moving forward with our legislative goals. So that's what I was thinking, is to have it possibly in the middle of November or towards the end of November when we get together, different time than our first and third meeting.
The one thing, I know that the statewide association's legislative goals process, their legislative goals committee is meeting the 18th and 19th of November, and after that they'll have kind of a priority list pending board approval, board of directors approval on what the association's actually going to be looking for this year. I think there was like 208 legislative goals that were submitted from only 30-something counties this year. So, and so they've got quite a bit. I don't know whether we want something like that to, when we get that from, could get that from them and help us to see if there's anything that we could join in, piggyback on.
Well, if we look at the 18th is the Thursday before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's when they're going to be meeting, yeah, the 18th and 19th.
We could look at getting together November the 29th or the 30th, which would be a Monday or a Tuesday, later in the afternoon. And we'd have a good opportunity to talk about it. So what I will do is, if we can place this on our November the 1st agenda, Mrs. Honeycutt, to confirm it. Actually, yeah, November the 1st, we can maybe set a possible date so we can talk about it. But I think it's important for us all to talk about it.
I was looking at the Code of Ethics. Is that pretty well set, what has to be in the Code of Ethics, or is it up to us to write pretty much what we want to?
Well, as Kay mentioned, Fleming Bell from the Institute of Government developed sort of a model
Okay.
Code of Ethics that I think most people have been using or sticking fairly close to it.
Okay. So we tried it about 5 years ago. I think I may have something still as if I wrote up. So, but I'm not going to dare say that I cannot do Fleming Bell. So,
Commissioner Minot, did you have something to add?
No, you got my points about, I was going to say that you needed to be sure that the new commissioners were involved in this.
I think, yes.
I mean, I'd like to have my comments heard, but other than that, and would it, while you're on that, would it be unethical if I don't take the training since I'm leaving on December?
No.
Thank you.
If you don't, then you have to serve for another 4 years in a capacity designated by the new Board of Commissioners. So if we have a motion to table this until November the 1st.
So moved.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. With that, I believe it covers all of our topics in regards to new business. Am I missing anything, Mrs. Honeycutt? Under new business?
We did have an old business item.
I don't have anything under my old business.
Right, that's the closed session item.
Yeah. Okay. We've covered all of our new business. Do we have a motion to go into closed session to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the county and ask or invite Mr. McDaniels and Mr. Cox into that meeting? We have a motion, we have a second.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I think we also want to add
I was-
that other matter as a closed session item.
I was going to
Consult
take care of
with-
that next.
Consult with your attorney.
Okay.
And
also to consult with our attorney about
to-
matters pending, or to preserve the attorney-client privilege.
Before we vote, I've got also a couple of dates for the board on the Animal Preservation and Protection Advisory Committee.
Okay.
If we want to talk about those for now, or you want to wait till after we finish the closed session?
Why don't you talk about those now?
Okay.
And that way it'll be a little bit.
Just real quick, we're meeting tonight. The way it's kind of set up now with a meeting schedule, we meet after our meeting. So nothing, we won't be able to talk about anything we talk about tonight until the next work session or bring it up at the October 18th meeting. There is a resolution that kind of put together, crafted, that I want to ask the committee to take a look at tonight that kind of takes the idea of no-kill community and lays out some of the parameters of that and what that would entail. And so what I'd like to do is, once we review it tonight, send it on to all y'all to take a look at. And it involves no expenditures of money. It's just basically establishing some milestones and basically some kind of a short-term effort to open animal control and do some things there. And we've got, I think, some folks that are going to step up to the plate to head that effort in the short term to help get dogs out of the animal control, to help get those out to foster care and adopted. Long term, and this is going to be the majority of the meeting tonight, is that we're going to be talking about long term, what are 3 different directions we could go in. And one of them is, one model is to come for this board to consider the adoption or the creation of a full-time paid adoption coordinator or director that would work on some way, in the county government, that would run a public adoption program that would themselves actually recruit volunteers and put the program together. Second option is that group to totally work to form a new nonprofit organization that would be totally independent, that would basically run the community adoption program. And the third is for us to put together as a board a set of guidelines and standards that would be parameters, and we treat it like a contract situation where we would actually solicit bids from the community, from our local rescue groups or a rescue group to provide us with, to run basically the adoption program in the shelter using the funds that are now being used in the shelter. I've had a long talk with Sheriff Riley. He is open to the idea of actually separating the animal control officers from the shelter, that he would still manage the animal control officers and the enforcement function of the ordinance, but that he would no longer manage in the shelter, and that we would use the resources that we now give him to run the shelter with and use those in this adoption program. So that's what I was going to get from the committee tonight, is kind of the pros and cons of each one of those, and also the reality of the fact that we're not going to probably do much more business than we have to before the new board takes their seats and the election in between. So it would probably be the first of the year before anything would really ever, those long-term things. But with a short-term effort, you kind of relieve some of the, I don't know if this helps get some things moving so you're not just continuing to go just like we've been going. So.
I just have one comment.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you refer to it as a no-kill shelter,
Yeah.
it bothers me.
And
I don't know why. No-kill is positive, but it's also negative.
Uh-huh.
And I think that it would be much better if you can come up with a positive title that is more adoptive instead of
Got it.
negative.
Okay. In fact, actually, in the resolution, there's only, I think there's one mention that's made in there. Rather than that, it's talking about guaranteed adoption program more than anything else. But it's the goal, what we got to do is really set a goal of over 4 or 5 years, or 2 years or 3 years, how that would be, what percentage we're looking at, what percentage of savable animals we would have out of the shelter, whether that's, 50, 60, 70, 80% are savable, or, by the time that, in 3 years, are we looking at having that euthanasia rate down below 30%, 20%? That's the question. And a lot of people are saying that you can, with putting in the right programs, move fairly quickly and have that euthanasia rate down below, down the 20s, 30s, that area, that arena.
Well, I think it's important that the animals that can be adopted are adopted. Adopt the adoptable. Number one. Number two is, when we're talking about percentages, let's understand what those percentages are. Because is it percentage per capita? Is it percentage of the animals? Because in any given year, the animals that are taken in is a different number every year. So if you're going off of that, then the number is going to fluctuate, or the percentage is going to fluctuate. So I think it's very important to identify. And taking up on what Commissioner Privet was talking about at our last meeting is, I'm reluctant to hire or create another position that we are funding when we have a current group or current opportunity of not having to fund a position, and those animals are being adopted. So that I would look at it as the third option is what can be done without having to expend any more county monies. Is that possible, and what's it going to look like?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else?
Anything else?
Into that tonight?
Okay. Now, we have a motion to go into closed session to discuss the expansion of businesses or the relocation of businesses, as well as inviting Mr. McDaniels and Mr. Cox into that meeting. And second is to discuss matters pertaining to attorney-client privilege and to protect that privilege. We have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all.